Good day. I'm Michael Hotchkiss from Princeton University's Office of Communications. Thanks for joining us for today's live video chat, which features a few of the hundreds of Princeton students spending part of their summer pursuing learning, research, service, and adventure around the globe. Many programs on campus, such as Study Abroad, the International Internship Program, Peers Global Seminars, and many others, offer students a range of opportunities and often substantial financial support. Students also have the opportunity to pursue independent research for their junior paper and senior theses at sites key to their work. Joining us today are four students and one recent alum whose destinations this summer include India, Switzerland, Zimbabwe, and Pakistan. So in just a minute you'll get to meet them, and I want to let you know first that if you would like to submit questions, you can do that if you're watching on Google+. I hope you do. And we'll take a couple of minutes at the end of our discussion and hopefully ask some of those questions. So right now I'll just ask our participants to go one by one and introduce themselves. Ali, you want to start us?
Hi, my name is Ali Markovich. I am a rising sophomore at Princeton. I'm undecided, but thinking about Woodrow Wilson and comparative literature. And I'm in Zimbabwe for the summer working at a contemporary art gallery called First Floor Gallery Harare.
Avanish?
Hi, I'm Avnish. I'm a rising sophomore as well. And I am in Switzerland right now in Geneva. I just completed 6 weeks in the Peers Global Seminar, which was on multilingualism, and I'm currently doing research. I'm a physics major.
Great, thanks. Hi, George.
Hi, everyone. My name is George Jen. I'm a rising junior at Princeton. My major is philosophy, and I'm taking minors in neuroscience and statistics. This summer, I was in Bangalore, India, at the Ashoka Foundation, a nonprofit NGO working in social entrepreneurship, and it was through the International Internship Program.
Thanks. Morgan.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I'm a rising senior, and my major is Slavic Languages and Literatures with a minor in dance and Russian and Eurasian studies. And on Sunday, I'm heading to Moscow for senior thesis research.
Great, thank you. Natasha's having a little trouble with her camera. Let's see if we can hear her. Natasha, are you there?
I'm here. I'm sorry about the camera. I don't know why it's not working, but my name is Natasha Japanwala. I'm a recent alum, so I just graduated in June, and I'll be spending the upcoming year as a Dale Fellow pursuing a project that I designed. And I'm currently in Karachi, Pakistan, which is home for me. So I'm spending the summer at home before starting my fellowship here.
Great, great. Thank you very much, each of you. So let's go back and spend a little more time talking to Ali about your experience and your project. So tell us first how you became interested in going to Zimbabwe, and just a little bit about your experience.
Sure. So I applied to this placement through IIP, the International Internship Program, and I was hoping to pursue something fun, to be honest, and something that I maybe wouldn't get a chance to pursue during the academic year. And I haven't taken an art history class yet, and I don't know that I will choose to pursue art history as a discipline in my academic studies. So I wanted to do something new academically, and also something that was new for me as a place. And I'd been to Europe, I'd been to India, and so I wanted to go somewhere very different, where I could learn something by just being there. And I found that to be really true about Zimbabwe. Yeah.
And so you're working in an art gallery, which is actually, if I understand right, contemporary art, which is, so tell us a little bit about your experience in the gallery. I know you're also working with young artists and working to help get them some exposure. So tell us a little bit about your experience at the gallery and getting to know the artists a little bit. And while you're doing that, I'll show a few photos that show some of the artists and also some of the works that they've done.
Yeah. So First Floor Gallery Harare is a contemporary art gallery showcasing contemporary local Zimbabwean artists. They work with a small group of artists, maybe about 8, and work really, really closely with a select few, which is different than most contemporary art galleries in general, but also in Zimbabwe, where there's a few contemporary art spaces, but they're mostly represent a lot more artists. And what's unique about First Floor Gallery is that they really work to get artists international exposure. So they take the artists to international art fairs, and if they can't take the artists, they take their work. And they hold exhibitions at the gallery, things that you'd expect of a contemporary art gallery. So my work has mostly been in research and in marketing. Those are some of the images of the artist's work that you're seeing right now. That is Mofat. He uses found objects in all of his work. So those are computer keys, some of the most recent pieces. And so most of the work that I'm doing, as I was saying, is research and in marketing. So in research, I'll give you a few examples of the kind of research that I've been doing. So it's been mostly for different projects for the gallery. So we had one exhibition called the Wayland Red Collection that was very early on when I first came. So I was doing research for that, and I'm hoping maybe to be able to do something with that later. It's on the Soviet perspective of Africans and African Americans, which is a really interesting political topic. Then I was doing research on, there's going to be a collaborative project between Mofat and an artist in the UK who both work in sculpture, and it's called All Our Ancestors. It's going to talk about religious syncretism in Zimbabwe, about modern and traditional religion, stuff like that. So I do a lot of background research and send it to the artists involved so they can do a more thorough, sort of not informed practice. Some of the pictures that you're seeing now are from the artist's studio, not the gallery. So this is their own space where they work and create art. Something that you'll notice about the studio is that it's not fancy. They sort of work wherever, put their work up on the walls. There's no easels, nothing like that. They often use found paper for their work, which is really would be surprising for artists who are so internationally renowned. Some of the other work I'm doing is I'm researching funding opportunities for the gallery, which it very much needs, and I have also been doing marketing in the sense that I'm helping the artists gain exposure. So I've been creating websites for them, updating the First Floor Gallery website, and work like that.
That's great, Ali. And I know that when we spoke earlier, you talked about how you've really learned about Zimbabwe. What you've learned about Zimbabwe goes beyond art, and sort of what the experience overall has been like about getting to spend time really living in Zimbabwe and spending time with the people. So just talk about that a little bit, please.
Yeah, so I found that a lot of the challenges that the art scene faces kind of mirror the challenges that much of the country faces and much of the economy faces here. So I'll give you a kind of interesting example, which is sort of the clash between modernity and tradition. So you'll find that sort of tourist art looks a lot like, carved giraffes and things like that. It's art that's made for an export market, and that's what people expect of African art. But it doesn't really represent what it's like here. So that, I think, is a lot of what sort of the trouble is with tourism in general here, not just with art, that people come and they want elephants and they want everything that you might expect on safari, but that's not what Africa is all about. it is about that in some ways, but not in all ways. So a lot of what's hard about Zimbabwe is that lately they haven't been exporting a lot, and things like what they've been exporting, so like that art that's made for an export market isn't as high quality. So it's really about taking something as an example that's like contemporary art, that's like these artists that really get to make something that's a really good combination of this more traditional version of Africa, and then something that's real and really represents their experience. Something that I've also found in the art scene that really is a good show of life here in general is the extent to which people make it work. So you kind of saw those images of the studio, and it's a beautiful space, and it has beautiful, beautiful work in it, but there's no frills, and people they're not living in excess. These artists they're not wealthy, and they make it work, and they make really great art. And say, in contrast to Princeton, where if you have an idea, it gets so easily funded, it's not like that in Zimbabwe, and I think in many other places in the world. And that mentality of making it work, and of understanding that maybe your problems, even if they seem big, can be not so big, is a really healthy perspective, I think, to have.
That's great, Ali. Thank you very much for that. And speaking of making it work, I think at least the last time we connected, Ali had started the generator at her apartment to make sure we could connect even if the power went out. So we really appreciate it. Let's talk now with Avanish. So tell us a little bit more about your Peers Global Seminar experience in Geneva. So the topic was what you were. Tell us why your seminar was placed in Geneva.
It's a very interesting setting. The topic is Our Multilingual World, Global Responses to Linguistic Diversity. And Geneva in particular was a very appropriate place, I think, for two reasons. One, firstly, nationally, it's located in Switzerland, which has four national languages, 3 official languages, 1 semi-official. And that poses a lot of interesting challenges, and the government must handle that as well as the people. So it's very interesting. Also, Swiss German is very, very different from standard German. So there's a diglossia as well. So that was a very interesting situation for us to observe and understand. And secondly, we are in Geneva, and over here, as you obviously know, there are many, many international organizations. And in each of these international organizations, you have a wide array of languages being spoken, and it's an exceptionally difficult challenge to manage that kind of linguistic diversity. So we were looking at how nationally Switzerland has responded, and how international organizations have responded to this kind of linguistic diversity.
That's great, Avanish. Thank you. And so your seminar was titled Our Multilingual World, and that was led by Professor David Bellos, who's a professor of French and Italian and comparative literature, and he's also the director of the program in translation and intercultural communication at Princeton. So he's a real expert in the field. I know that one of the things that you did is you had an opportunity to travel to a region where actually I guess sort of the fourth language of the nation is spoken by a relatively small group of people, and sort of explore that. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Mm-hmm. So the fourth national language of Switzerland is Romansh. It's spoken by around 60,000 people, and even as a language, there are 5 idioms, not all of which are very mutually intelligible, but it's spoken in the canton of Graubünden, and it's a language in danger, definitely, because every person who speaks Romansh also speaks Swiss German and Standard German. So, in terms of communication, whenever Romansh people have to communicate with others, they are able to do so in Swiss German. In
Yes.
that it poses very interesting challenges to the conservation of the language. It has an especially high status in Switzerland as a national language. Um, so we went to the Alps, to the high Alps, to the villages where they are spoken, where the idioms of Romansh are spoken, and we were able to do some field work to exactly understand the dynamics of Romansh usage. Because, as I said, even though many people speak it in those areas, it's not necessary that they will use it on a daily basis. So it was very interesting for us to go and explore the dynamics and see how Romansh in a written and spoken form are in usage there.
That's great, Avanish. Thank you very much. I'll give me a moment. I'll also show a couple of photos that you sent me from your trip that show a couple of the other types of things that you got to do. So let's see. So I think the first one had a couple of sort of optional activities that you participated in. You want to tell us about this a little bit, and then we'll look at the other photo too.
Yeah, this was halfway to the top of Mount Salève, which is just outside Geneva, and on the background you can see the city of Geneva. Maybe you can see the lake as well, the little blue thing in the just near the horizon. And we had many optional trips where we could go around and explore. We went to Chamonix, to I already mentioned to the canton of Graubünden, to Montreux, to Lausanne, and we had two groups, one which went to Basel and one which went to Aosta, and many of them were academic trips where we could explore the linguistic situation in those communities. So it was very interesting for us to learn about how linguistic diversity is being handled in so many different um, communities. This picture is of one trip that we had in Geneva itself, which was to the opera. Again, not all the members of the seminar are here. We were a total of 15 Princeton students and 5 University of Geneva students. Not everybody could make it to either these optional events, but even in Geneva, we were able to go around to a lot of different events, cultural events such as the opera and many academic-oriented events as well. For example, we were able to visit many different international organizations such as the UN, ILO, World Intellectual Property Organization, so forth and so forth. And we were able to see how they personally deal with linguistic diversity through their usually translation and interpretation departments.
That's great. That's great. Thank you very much, Avanish. Let's say hello to George and give George a chance to tell us some more about your work in India, and maybe you can start off by telling us, what is social entrepreneurship and how is the group that you were working with in India sort of putting that into action?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So this summer, I've been working with Ashoka, which is a nonprofit foundation specifically created to kind of grow and support the area of social entrepreneurship. And so social entrepreneurs are people who try to kind of tackle or solve, these large-scale social problems with new, more innovative solutions that have never been tried before, using creative business models to do social good. So one example that we give often is of Mohammed Yunus, who founded the Grameen Bank and won a Nobel Prize for his work. He provided microfinance services to the poor in Bangladesh. So his pioneering work kind of started a whole revolution in microfinance and has really changed the way that we think about financial services today. And so Ashoka, as an organization, supports these social entrepreneurs by selecting and finding these leading entrepreneurs into its Ashoka Fellowship. And in the fellowship, we provide financial support. We hold events linking fellows to experts in related fields, and we also connect fellows with each other. And so this summer, I've been working on a couple of different things. First, I've been assisting the venture team with its process of evaluating and selecting candidates for the fellowship. I've been able to conduct research, read different academic literature in different fields, and interview these. And I've been also interviewing these people working in the different social sectors, ranging from elderly care, education technology, microfinance, looking at different agriculture business models, and more. And my task in this on the venture team is to understand and learn about the entrepreneurship model and vision that each entrepreneur has, and then champion their idea to the rest of the venture team. So I've been able to be exposed to a lot of different areas, and that's been really exciting. In addition, Ashoka has specific social initiatives in specific fields, and the two current ones are a road safety initiative, and if you've been to India, you'll know that road safety is a big issue, especially in Bangalore, and a nutrition initiative, which is trying to tackle the issue of childhood malnutrition. And I've been working with the nutrition team to design a survey that measures different indicators of nutritional status for a sample of students in Maharashtra, which is a western province of India. And it's been a really great introduction to social science survey design, and I've been able to use what I've learned in my statistics course at Princeton. A lot of these concepts and statistics have come up, and they've been really handy. And it's just been very rewarding to be able to use what I've learned in the classroom and apply that to designing a survey to measure childhood nutrition. And then finally, as an independent project, I analyzed the venture team's knowledge management processes. So I've been trying to understand how Ashoka manages its large quantity of information that it processes, because Ashoka receives a lot of information, interviewing pretty much like hundreds of candidates over the course of a 3 to 4 month period. And we collect a lot of information about different social sectors, what different people are doing, what the government is doing in these different areas. And I've been trying to present a plan to the Ashoka office about how to revamp, reorganize, and to make that knowledge useful to the public in forms of like sector reports, trends, and sector updates.
Well, thanks a lot. And one of the things, sort of continuing in this vein of your work with the people, we talked previously, and you really focused on sort of being surprised and interested in the spirit of entrepreneurship that you saw from people in India that you were working with. Can you sort of explain what that means to you and how you saw that?
Right. So the Ashoka office in India, Ashoka is a worldwide organization with offices all over the world, but it's especially vibrant in India. And I would have to say it's because just everywhere I've seen traveling to different places in the country, I really get the sense that there's this spirit of entrepreneurship that is not restricted to entrepreneurs who have big organizations, but that it's present in just a lot of people who are just have kind of like this business sense and this drive to start their own businesses or do their own thing. And a lot of it comes from I guess what we call the informal sector in India. I once heard the statistic that over 90% of the Indian economy is composed of like this informal sector, which is this untaxed kind of like do-it-yourself, starting your own businesses. So whether it's people selling dosas and other delicious foods on the street, or people starting their own schools. There are these tons of these small-scale private schools being started to address educational gaps. It's just really in the culture and the spirit, and it's just kind of, I think entrepreneurship and what I've experienced of Indian culture go hand in hand really well.
That's great. Thanks, George. Just take a moment here. I see that it wasn't all work for you in India. You sent us a nice photo of you just want to tell us about that and what you got to visit.
This is a picture of me at the Taj Mahal. I was able to travel thanks to some generous IAP funding, and I was able to visit the Taj Mahal, which was, it's even more magnificent in person than it is on the photos. I was able to travel with some other friends of mine who were also doing IAPs in Delhi and Mumbai. I was also, in addition to that, I was able to visit Hyderabad and Kerala, which is, since it's the monsoon season, there are some nice backwater ways that we took and some houseboats that we were able to hang out on. And it's traveling around has definitely been amazing.
Great. Thank you, George. Morgan, so you are actually joining us from California, and you're the person on the panel who's still preparing for their trip. So you're leaving, I understand, this weekend. So you're going to Russia, and tell us about what you're going to be doing.
I'm going to Russia to do thesis research, and for my thesis, although it's still in the preliminary stages, I sort of want to look at notions of celebrity as it surrounds defection, and so I'm going to be going to lots of libraries to look at their archives and sort of get a sense of the conditions imposed upon ballet and the protocols of the party in relationship to ballet, and I'm going to sort of focus on two dancers, one who left during Soviet times and one who left more recently, and sort of use them as a lens to view how politics influence ballet, and sort of maybe hypothesize about a trajectory that ballet could have taken if there weren't so many conditions imposed upon it, because it's often used as sort of like a propaganda arm for the government. So
I understand that this ties in both to your major, Near Eastern Studies, right? And
Slavic languages and literatures.
Sorry, Slavic languages. Sorry, but also to your personal interest in dance. So just talk about your background in both of those areas and what's attracted you to this topic.
Well, I've been doing ballet since the age of 3, and since high school I trained with Russian ballet teachers who both trained at the Bolshoi Academy and then danced with Moscow Classical Ballet. And so when I came to Princeton, I had an interest in learning Russian because I'd spent so long sort of immersed in the culture through all of my hours of dance class with my teachers, and I thought it'd be fun to learn the language, and then it just sort of grew from there. And that's what drew me to Slavic languages and literature. And from there, ballet's just always been a great passion of mine, so I thought that it'd be very interesting to explore it from the intellectual perspective as opposed to just from a dancer's perspective. So that's what sort of drew me to the thesis. And I think there's nothing more enigmatic than sort of defection for a ballet dancer, because you look at some of the greats like Baryshnikov and Nureyev, and they just sort of really captured the imagination not only of Russians but also of the rest of the world when they defected. So I think that that's sort of what interested me in the celebrity aspect of it all.
Okay, so we actually have a question that I think is a good one to talk about in terms of why it's important to be able to take these sorts of trips. So what do you hope to learn or discover about your topic and for your thesis while you're in Russia that you couldn't experience or learn while you're here in Princeton? So what is it really about the trip that's key to your work?
Well, I'll have access to some documents that I wouldn't be able to access because lots of the archives aren't digitized there. So I'll be able to really immerse myself in it and get, as opposed to some of them I might be able to access online, but being there, I have an entire breadth of resources that would never be available to me in America, and I can just spend hours in the library researching. I'll also be able to go to some ballet performances in my free time, and just really, I feel like doing research on site, you get a lot more insight into what you're looking at rather than just doing it remotely, and I think that it'll really enrich my experience and enrich my ultimate project.
That's great. Well, speaking of going to the ballet, you sent us a couple of photos of a previous trip to Russia, and unless I'm mistaken, this is we have one of you at the ballet. Is that right?
Yep, that's at the Alexandrinsky Theater where we saw Swan Lake.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And one of the interesting things that I never realized is all of the theaters have their own sort of color schemes, which is cool. So Alexandrinsky is red, Mikhailovsky is orange, and the Mariinsky is sort of a blue.
Great. And this photo?
That's in front of one of the Tsars, which is in front of the Marble Palace, and it used to be actually, so that statue was made by an Italian Impressionist sculptor, and he was the son of a Russian emigre, and it was commissioned, but most of the Russian public hated it, and they think that it's ugly, and they call it a behemoth. And so in Soviet times, it was moved in front of the Marble Palace from its former place, which was rather prominent in St. Petersburg, and it stands there. That was one of my favorite places to visit in St. Petersburg. So there's a cool little passageway of wind coming off the Geneva there, and you could sit and read, and it was quiet.
Great, great. Thank you very much, Morgan, and I hope you have a good and productive and safe trip.
Thank you.
And let's speak to Natasha. So Natasha, you are one alum on the panel here, but you're going to be spending the next year on a fellowship through the University of Dale Fellowship. So tell us a little bit about the fellowship and the project that you're preparing to spend the next year working on.
Right, so the university gives Dale Fellowships to 1 or 2 graduating seniors to pursue a project that they've proposed, an independent project. And so what I'll be doing is I'll be splitting the next year between 4 cities that have big Pakistani immigrant populations. And what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be basically be doing 2 big things. The first is I'll be writing a collection of short stories based on narratives that I'll be getting a sense of through interviews. And what I'm interested in is the objects that people carried with them when they left Pakistan to go to all these cities that they ended up settling in. And I want to use those narratives to write a collection of short stories. And I'm interested not just in the story of migration and settlement, but I'm interested in the value of physical objects in an increasingly digital age. And to kind of tap into that more, I'll be starting a website that's a digital museum and an online magazine at the same time, where artists and writers and filmmakers can write about objects that are meaningful to them. And basically there'll be photographs of objects, and you click on it, and then you get the story of why that object is meaningful. So I'm going to be exploring themes of movement, themes of settlement, and themes of and the ultimate theme is the value of the physical object as well.
Okay, so you sent us, you sent me a couple of photos of objects, so maybe we can look at those and you can tell us a little bit about them and how they relate to your work.
Right, so I'm spending the summer at home, and part of the reason I decided to do that was to revise my senior thesis, which was a collection of short stories set in Karachi. And while I've been home, I've been sort of plowing through my grandmother's house for objects that have been meaningful to her. So that is the tray. Quickly about my grandparents, they were based in Tanzania, and then they fled, I think in the beginning of the 1970s, and they went to England for a few years, and then they came to Pakistan. And so these are obviously family photos, and each frame has its own story to tell. So it's not just the photograph that tells of our family history, but the frames and where those frames were bought and where they came from. But all of them are set on a tray that my mother and her sister bought for my grandmother when they were in England. And of course, I'm interested in when this was made, which was about 40 years ago, where it was bought and where it was brought from. But I'm also just as interested in imagining the story behind where it came from. So, when my grandmother told me that my mother and her sister had bought her this tray, it was for her birthday when they just moved to England, and she was quite lonely. She'd left all her friends behind, and my mother was quite young at the time. She was about 6 years old, and she'd saved up all her pocket money and gone out and bought this tray for my grandmother because she thought it would make her happy. And so, through the lens of this object, I'm getting a sense of my grandmother's loneliness during that time and how her kids brought her happiness at that time, and that tray still survives, and that story is still there if you just take the time out to try to find it. And then the other object that I also sent you a picture of is a little cup. Yep, that's a little cup, and the name engraved on it C.C. Patel was of my grandmother's neighbor when they were living in Tanzania, and this was a little kid who had a birthday party, and sort of gave the party giveaways in this little cup that my aunt, who was then about 7 or 8 years old, kept and brought with her to England, and they brought it to Pakistan, and so, you know, that's again very, very old, probably about 50 years now. And it's just traveled with my grandparents when they fled Tanzania on a ship, and there's that whole story. And I've never been to Tanzania, but you know, holding that cup, I could imagine what their lives there were like, and I can maybe write a story about it through the lens of that one moment. And that one object. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a sense of how to tell stories through objects, and how to be better at asking people about them as well. Like, you know, at first when I asked my grandmother, like, you know, can you show me an object that is meaningful to you? She was like a bit confused as to what exactly I meant. And now she just keeps calling me up every day, and she keeps finding new things, and I keep asking her about it, and I'm just learning all sorts of things about her life that I didn't know otherwise. And I'm hoping that that's what's going to continue to happen once I start traveling. I'll be spending my time split between London, Barcelona, Toronto, and New York, all of which have big Pakistani immigrant communities. And I'm hoping to uncover all sorts of stories as I go along. The other day, well, actually today I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was looking through his grandmother's old things. His grandmother died recently, and he found all these sort of silver antique pots that she'd brought with her when the partition happened, when India and Pakistan became separate countries. And so I really believe, like, in our homes there are all these stories that tell of history, and our family histories, and our national histories as well. But that's not to say it's just older things and older people who have stories to tell. I think each of us in this Google Hangout, actually, if we think about it, even though we're young and we haven't traveled as much, or haven't had as dramatic migrations as perhaps our ancestors had, we've still moved from one place to another at some point. Like, we all moved to Princeton to go to Princeton, and that was sort of a movement. And if nothing else, we've moved from past to present. And so if we look at the things in our lives, I believe that we can mine all sorts of interesting stories. And that's why I decided to launch a digital museum in addition to writing my own book, because I think there are just many stories, and I want as many channels to accessing them as I can build.
Great. Could you just tell us a little bit about, you know, the importance of getting a fellowship and having, you know, the opportunity to spend the time doing this? You know, is this something that you could have done without the fellowship? Just talk about how the fellowship sort of enables you to pursue this.
Well, it's unbelievable because, well, just first of all, the primary thing for me is just the time to write. That's unbelievable to have. And then the time to pursue a project like this, which is quite unique. You know, and if I, you know, when you graduate from college, you sort of have to think about a career, and you have to figure out how to support yourself. And in doing that, you often end up maybe not doing a project like this. I don't know if I'd have been able to do a project like this on this scale. I might still have written a book like this. I might still have launched a museum magazine, but I wouldn't have been able to give as much time as I am now going to be able to give to thinking about this project, to interviewing people, to finding stories, to really sort of, like, just in the couple of months that, you know, since graduating, I've thought about this project. It's just taken on so many new themes, and so many new dimensions. Like, initially I was just going to start an online magazine and ask people to submit essays, but now I think a digital museum is a more interesting way to go. And I've been talking to artists, I've been talking to filmmakers, who, instead of, you know, because initially I just wanted people to write essays about objects that were meaningful to them. But now that I've had time to think about it, and I've had time to meet more people and talk about what they're doing, I'm thinking, well, people could make films, or people could paint pictures, and just, it's unbelievable how much more you can do if you have time, basically. And so that's what I think the fellowship gives me. And, you know, so there's that. That's the first thing, that's just time, which is extremely, extremely precious. But also, you know, in order to get the fellowship, I had to write this proposal and hone it. And that allowed me to bring together all these different themes that I've been interested in throughout my time at Princeton. I wrote about migration in fiction, particularly, you know, Pakistani immigrants, for my junior paper. I wrote a collection of short stories for my senior thesis. And I was I was part of the Nassau Literary Review, which is a student-run literary magazine, and so all these themes were at play, but the ability to pursue this fellowship allowed me to tie them together in a very unique way, and I don't know if that would have happened in that fashion otherwise. So I think it gives you time to pursue interesting projects, but it also, for me, gave me the chance to create an interesting project in a very innovative way, and I'm very grateful for that. Very grateful.
That's great. Thank you, Natasha. I hope that as your projects start to come together, your book and your digital museum, that you'll let us know how we can check out both of those things.
Definitely. Well, I'll have a blog, so if you follow me on Twitter, you'll get updates about everything I do.
Oh, excellent, excellent. That's great. So let's see, just a moment. Sorry. All right. So that brings us to the conclusion of our live video chat today. Thanks so much to Ali, Avanish, Morgan, Natasha, and George for sharing part of their summer with us. If you'd like more information about Princeton, about international opportunities at Princeton, you can visit the Princeton website. From there, you can get to websites of the Office of International Programs, Peers, which sponsors many international programs, and other sites. So thank you very much for joining us. Have a good day.